Fight for the Unborn. Lauren Ashburn talks to Cardinal Raymond Burke about the pro-life movement in Italy and a preview of tomorrow's March for Life in Rome. Equality Act. The House passes a measure aimed at giving civil rights protections to people who identify as gay or transgender, why opponents believe the bill restricts religious beliefs. White House visit. Hungary's Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade tells us about talks earlier this week between his country's leader and President Trump. And a real masterpiece, how the Vatican is honoring the 500th anniversary of the death of Leonardo da Vinci. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, May 17, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for News from a Catholic Perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby. The president of the 9th Annual March for Life in Italy believes Rome is the perfect location to defend the unborn on a global scale.
Rome is the capital of the Catholic world. So I think that people from all the other countries who are engaged in the pro-life movement are very interested in being in Rome, because from Rome you can give a voice to the whole world.
Virginia Coda Nunciante says the event's focus is to protest abortion in Italy. It has been legal there since 1978. Last year, pro-life supporters marched through the Eternal City, passing by famous landmarks like the Colosseum. Earlier today, Lauren Ashburn spoke to Cardinal Raymond Burke about Rome and the pro-life movement.
Joining us now is His Eminence Cardinal Raymond Burke. Your Eminence, tomorrow you'll be marching in Rome along with other pro-life supporters. You've been participating since 2012. Now, we've seen a decline here in the belief that life is sacred from conception to natural death. Is that the same in Italy?
Yes, as the faith is under attack in the United States and in other places, it's also true in Italy. There's a growing secularism, materialism, also in Europe a very strong influence of Freemasonry. And so the church has to defend Christ and his truth by her teachings and by her witness to his teachings. Well, now, interestingly enough, the March for Life, this particular March for Life in which I'm going to take part, has been growing every year. And it also has an international participation in the sense that people are here from Ireland, Poland, Holland, Germany, France, Spain. I just took part in a conference this afternoon as a preliminary to the march, and there was a very broad participation by people from Europe, and also there were Americans there as well, and North Americans and South Americans.
It's good to see. You know, here in the U.S., we just had a pretty controversial bill passed through the Alabama legislature, and the governor signed it. It nearly outlaws all abortions, almost all abortions in the state, and it's intended to be a direct challenge to Roe versus Wade. That's the Supreme Court decision that declared state measures prohibiting abortion unconstitutional. So I'm curious if you're following it, and if you think that this is a turning point in the pro-life movement in the U.S.
Yes, I have been following it, and I am very encouraged by what the bill that the governor of Alabama signed in these days. And I think that as citizens, patriotic citizens, we must do everything that we can to try to restore the protection of all human life in our country and to end the scourge of abortion. And so this is one way, is to challenge Roe versus Wade, and this decision which opened a floodgate of really for millions of abortions that have taken place in the more than 40 years since that decision was given.
In your view, Cardinal Burke, what is the foundation of the crisis in our society, in Europe, all over the world? Fundamentally,
it's the old sin of pride. In other words, that we pretend that we are God, that we can define when human life begins, and now that we can define when death is going to take place, and now that we can define what marriage is. And these are all truths, the beginning of human life, the end of human life, marriage, are all truths that are written in our human nature by God from the beginning of creation. And so this is simply man's pride, thinking that he can play God and can decide these matters without respect for the good order that God has placed in creation. That's fundamentally at the root of it.
Cardinal Raymond Burke, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. God bless you.
And for the first time ever, EWTN will broadcast Rome's March for Life live. Coverage begins tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern. Pope Francis tells healthcare workers to treat the sick as people, not numbers.
Proprio lo sforzo di trattare I malati come persone e non come numeri.
In a meeting with Italian healthcare providers, the Holy Father praised their service to the most vulnerable and their respect for life at all stages. The group was celebrating its 40th anniversary. Lawmakers in Missouri passed a bill to ban abortion after 8 weeks. The proposal now heads to Governor Mike Parson. The Republican is expected to sign it. The measure includes exceptions like if the mother's life is in danger, but not for pregnancies that are the result of rape or incest. The House of Representatives votes in favor of providing civil rights protections to gay people and those who identify as transgender. The bill is called the Equality Act, but opponents say it's really the Inequality Act. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi spoke to lawmakers on both sides of this national debate. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Wyatt. Civil rights law protects you when you go out looking for a job, a house, a loan. People can't turn you away because of your sex, your religion, or your race. Today, Democrats moved to add gender identity and sexual orientation to this list of protected classes.
The bill is passed.
Every single Democrat and 8 Republicans voted for the Equality Act.
This is truly historic.
The bill's sponsor, David Cicilline, is the 4th member of Congress to call himself gay.
The Equality Act doesn't force priests or other clergy to perform same-sex marriages or any other religious ceremonies against their beliefs.
But conservatives argue the bill will trample freedoms and could force Christian adoption agencies to place children with same-sex couples.
This bill is a total anti-religious liberty bill from beginning to end. It sets the government in a position to use its strong arm to force a belief system that contradicts most faiths in this country.
Democrat and feminist activist Kara Dansky also opposed the bill. She worries it would allow biological males to use women's locker rooms.
As long as the epidemic of male violence against women continues, women have the right to demand separate spaces from males regardless of how they identify.
Republican Vicky Hartzler warns the Equality Act could lead to true inequality.
Well, I think it would mean the end of women's sports. Ultimately, we already have a male who has transitioned to women, win a cycling race in another part of the country and plans to go out for the Olympic team.
California's Katie Hill criticizes that.
This is fear-mongering.
I caught up with her after the vote.
People do not try to game the system by becoming transgendered to ruin women's sports or to have a competitive advantage. It's literally crazy.
There are no chances that the Equality Act will pass the Republican-led Senate. A Trump administration official says they do oppose all discrimination, but they say the Equality Act is filled with what they call poison pills, threatening the rights of conscience and the rights of parents. Wyatt?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reporting. Thanks, Jason. The U.S. Catholic Bishops' Conference is among the groups concerned by the Equality Act. They worry it will restrict religious freedom. Archbishop Joseph Kurtz of Louisville says the church has always opposed unjust discrimination, but also must remain faithful to its teachings.
To decline to perform a sterilization or to refuse to affirm a false view of marriage, this is not unjust discrimination. And we have to stand firm, but always in a very pastoral way.
President Trump says he hopes the U.S. is not on a path to war with Iran. Tension has mounted since he pulled the U.S. out of the Iran nuclear deal last year. Now the president is dismissing suggestions that his own advisors are pushing him into a conflict. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Wyatt. Earlier this week, an advisor to Iran's president firing a warning shot over Twitter to President Trump saying you wanted a better deal with Iran. Looks like you were going to get a war instead. Iran isn't happy about crippling sanctions reinstated since the U.S. left the nuclear deal. And today, President Trump unhappy with media reports. As tension mounts between the U.S. and Iran, President Trump says the media isn't helping. He writes on Twitter, "Fake news media is hurting our country with its fraudulent and highly inaccurate coverage of Iran. It is scattershot, poorly sourced, made up, and dangerous. At least Iran doesn't know what to think, which at this point may very well be a good thing." Thursday at the White House, the president was asked to clarify his position.
President, are we going to war with Iran? Hope not.
Still, the president has warned the country, and in response to reports he may send 120,000 troops to Iran.
We have not planned for that. Hopefully we're not going to have to plan for that. And if we did that, we'd send a hell of a lot more troops than that.
Tension increasing over the last 2 weeks after a statement from President Trump's national security advisor, John Bolton, declared a U.S. aircraft carrier and bomber task force would move into the Persian Gulf region in response to a number of troubling and escalatory indications and warnings. Democratic Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi sends a reminder to Trump administration officials like John Bolton.
And the responsibility in the Constitution is for Congress to declare war. So I hope that the president's advisors recognize that they have no authorization to go forward in any way.
And today we spoke with Tony Perez, a Catholic law professor, urging caution. He cites the church teaching on war.
It demands that we act with restraint. It demands that we pursue a prudent path.
Today, Iran's Revolutionary Guard reportedly warned that Iranian missiles can easily reach warships in the Persian Gulf. As the rhetoric escalates on both sides, U.S. lawmakers over on Capitol Hill are demanding more information about all of this from the White House. Wyatt?
White House correspondent Mark Irons reporting. Thanks, Mark. Coming up, the foreign minister from Hungary tells us how his country is defending religious freedom. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. Hungary's leader confirms his country's plans to buy medium-range air defense missiles from the United States, but he says it's too soon to give all the details. Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban and President Donald Trump met Monday. Orban's was the first visit of a Hungarian Prime Minister to the Oval Office since 2005. Joining me now is Peter Szijjarto, Hungary's Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Welcome into the broadcast, sir. Ahead of Monday's meeting with President Trump, Prime Minister Orban had said he looked forward to strengthening the alliance between U.S. and Hungary. Prime Minister Orban's announcement to buy medium-range air defense missiles from the United States seems to be sending a positive signal. How would you characterize the talks between the two leaders?
Well, I can tell you that the talks were very relaxed in a very, very friendly atmosphere. So it was obvious that the two leaders have a totally similar approach when it comes to the major dilemmas of global politics, be it the issue of illegal migration, be it the issue of security, be it the issue of patriotic policies, and especially be it the issue of protection of Christian communities and Christian values all over the world. When it comes to the arms and the defense cooperation, I can tell you that there's nothing new in this issue. When your Secretary of State visited Hungary back at the beginning of this year, we have already made it very clear that we would be very happy to include American technology and American arms into our middle-range missile defense system. Now we have just ensured your president that we take it seriously. Talks are going on. They are approaching to the final stage. They are not there yet, but hopefully we'll get there soon.
You had mentioned migration as one of the big issues they've been talking about. Earlier this week at a meeting at the United Nations, you had said that migration-based economic and social policies have regularly failed in Europe in recent years. Can you explain what you meant by that and what you think Hungary is doing to try to meet those challenges?
You know, if you look at the western part of Europe, socially speaking, you will see that there are parallel societies being created because of migration. So these are not mixed societies, these are parallel societies. And the phenomenon a perilous society has a huge security risk. If you look back on the last 4 years, since the migration crisis hit into Europe, you'll see that there were 30 major terrorist attacks committed in Europe by persons with a migratory background, killing more than 300 Europeans, innocent people injuring more than 1,300. So this is unacceptable for us. And if you look at these parallel societies, you will see that the new incomers will put their pressure on the silent majority, which had been living there for a long time. And this loud minority does not accept the rules, regulations, culture, the expectations regarding behavior in these countries. So what we have done is the following, that we made it very clear that there's no illegal way to come to Hungary. The only way one can come to Hungary is the legal one. And we made it very clear that until this government is in office, it will make it impossible for illegal migrants to come to Hungary.
Hungary has pledged financial assistance to the injured survivors and orphan children of the Easter Sunday attacks in Sri Lanka. Tell me about your government's support of them and in general about persecuted Christians, because your government has made it very clear that they care about the issue of religious freedom.
Well, you know, we have to be honest on this issue, and we have to understand that there's an enormous hypocrisy around this issue. We have to be brave enough to speak about Christian communities being in need, and we have to be brave enough to understand and speak about that the Christian religion, the Christian groups, are the most persecuted religious groups on earth. So 4 of every 5 persons who are attacked because of his or her religion and belief are Christians. This terrible attack happened in Sri Lanka, and you know, I was really frustrated to see that no one basically among the global leaders was brave enough to say that this was an attack against Christians, against Catholic people. So we help, of course, the families and the orphans after this terrible attack, as we help the Christian communities in the Middle East as well to be able to stay at their homes, or if they had to escape, to be able to return. So far, we have helped 35,000 Christians in the Middle East, be it Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, to be able to return or to stay. We are covering the medical expenditures of 3 Christian hospitals in Syria. We are financing humanitarian activities of Christian communities and churches in Middle East, because we are a Christian country. We have been a Christian country for more than 1,000 years, as the first saint king of ours offered the country to Mary the Virgin, and that gives us responsibility.
So many important issues that you're talking about this week and, of course, in the months to come. Peter Szijjarto, Hungary's Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation.
Father Jonathan Morris, a well-known priest and Fox News contributor, says he's asking to leave the priesthood. In a statement on Facebook, he writes in part, "My own experience should not take away anything from the many heroic men and women who are living out their religious vocations with admirable fidelity and fulfillment. I will be in the pews ready to support you because my faith in God and love for my church is stronger than ever. I look forward to serving in new ways alongside of you." He ends, "Please pray for me." Up next, we hear about the first Catholic saint from Sudan and our Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and whether it's targeting pro-life views. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby. Today marks the 27th anniversary of the beatification of St. Josephine Bakhita. In 2000, she became the first person to be canonized from Sudan and is the patron saint of the country. She was born in the Darfur region in 1869 and at an early age was kidnapped and forced into slavery. She would later join a religious order, the Canossian Daughters of Charity. Joining me now is William Saunders, Director of the Program in Human Rights at the Institute for Human Ecology at the Catholic University of America. Bill, welcome to the broadcast. You were in Rome in 2000 for St. Josephine's canonization. What was that experience like?
It was fantastic. I was with the Sudanese. I had been working in Sudan against slavery and genocide, and it turned out the area I was working in is where Bakhita was from. So when I was working there, she was still blessed. You know, she had not been canonized. And then we came to Rome for a canonization. And I can tell you, great joy. You just can't imagine the joy of an oppressed people when their patron, the person they prayed to in heaven, you know, is being recognized as a saint. It was a great day.
Well, of course, St. Josephine was born, as I mentioned, in the 19th century in a small village in Sudan, and after she was sold into slavery, she had various owners that tortured her. They branded her, beat her, and cut her, and it was only later when she was taken to Italy that she eventually got freedom and was able to join the religious order, the Canossian Daughters of Charity. What is it about? How did she find her way to that, specifically to become a religious sister?
Well, it's an amazing story. I mean, she was owned and sold and taken to Italy as a slave. Mm-hmm. But when she was there, she came in contact with the Canossian sisters, daughters. And as she said, she through them, she met the Lord she had always known in her heart, but she had not known his name. So once the dignity, her individual dignity as a human person and her Lord, and she grasped it, she wouldn't go back as a slave to Sudan. So she stayed with them as their doorkeeper, mm-hmm. and became a great saint in Italy.
Incredible. You know, her story is so incredible. You've actually considered her and entrusted her to a master's program in human rights at the Catholic University of America. Tell me about some of the challenges to human rights in Sudan. You'd mentioned genocide and slavery. I understand there's a lot of problems with their neighbor at South Sudan as well.
Yeah, the interesting thing is people listening may not realize, but 25 years ago, there was no South Sudan. There was only Sudan. And what was going on was slavery and genocide. And the area where she was taken as a slave in the late 1800s, they were taking slaves. And we went in and documented this. And when I was there and all the people I was working with Bakhita was the person that they would pray to. So it was through President Bush and all kinds of efforts internationally by many people, they had a referendum, and now you have a South Sudan and Sudan. In South Sudan, there's some bad things going on. There's some inter group warfare, murder things going on. But the significant thing is the genocide and the slavery was really stopped following the Sudan Peace Act. So South Sudan itself is kind of a mess, and there's a lot of people working to make it better, but it's at least not genocide.
Well, I know now that we've aired this, a lot of our viewers will now be thinking about St. Josephine and asking for her intercession for Sudan, South Sudan, and the whole region. William Saunders, Director of the Program in Human Rights at the Institute for Human Ecology at the Catholic University of America, thanks so much for talking with us.
Glad to be here and glad to have her as our patron.
Great. 2019 marks 500 years since the passing of one of the world's artistic geniuses, Leonardo da Vinci. This week, the Vatican provided an up-close look at a 16th century tapestry based on da Vinci's painting, The Last Supper. The piece was put on display after 18 months of restoration work. It's woven purely from silk with threads of gold and silver. Scholars believe the work was produced in the year 1516 at the request of the King of France and his mother by a person or persons unknown. The work will be returned to France for 3 months this summer. Finally tonight, Lauren Ashburn is back with a commentary on social media and the targeting of pro-life views.
And now for my commentary. The White House just set up a website for people who feel they have been unfairly banned or penalized by Twitter or Facebook to file a complaint. Maybe I should do that. For the last 2 weeks, Twitter has restricted our pro-life content. And what was our sin? We covered a rally Friday in Philadelphia, held at the spot where a state representative harassed a woman for peacefully protesting outside of an abortion clinic. When Alabama's governor signed into law the nation's most restrictive ban on abortion, both stories we posted were restricted as too sensitive. What was Twitter's reasoning? We were never told, despite our inquiries. But I can't help but wonder whether stories on states allowing late-term abortions until the time of birth ever ran afoul of the Twitter censors. Or is it only the pro-life point of view that triggers their sensitivity meter? This is the kind of thing that is undermining confidence in social media companies, where decisions sometimes seem arbitrary and politically biased. But don't worry, we'll keep tweeting.
Our thanks to Lauren for that commentary and the earlier interview with Cardinal Burke. And our thanks to you for watching this week. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We'll be back on Monday with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.